This link is for 5th grade, going along with the story is Zathura, a space adventure. If you would go ahead and make sure your hardcover treasures textbook is turned to page 360 and 361, this is where we're going to go ahead and get started. For this week, your activity, instead of doing a practice book page and following along with me, you are actually required to answer the questions at the end of the story. So please make sure you're following along, and maybe you can find those answers as we read. With that being said, let's go ahead and direct our attention to the vocabulary words that we've encountered in this week. We have rotated. Rotated means turned around on an axis or central point. Robot. A robot is programmed to do the job that a person usually does. Reversed. Reversed means moved in an opposite direction. Defective. Something that is defective has a flaw or weakness. Meteor. A meteor is a piece of rock from space. Dangling. Something that is dangling is hanging or swinging loosely. Staggered. Someone who staggered would be said to have swayed or walked unsteadily. Tokens. Tokens are pieces that mark your place on a game board. Polarity is a pull towards an object or in a particular direction. A gyroscope is a piece of equipment with a spinning wheel or a ball set in the frame that helps keep its direction from changing and malfunctioning, not working properly. All right, excellent. If you go ahead and direct your attention to page 360, we're going to talk a little bit about what our comprehension strategy this week is, and of course it's drawing conclusions. Remember to draw conclusions as you read, and use logical reasoning to consider various pieces of information. You should arrive at a new understanding about the events or a character in the story. Okay, let's take a look at the genre this week. This week the story is science fiction. Science fiction tells a story of imagined events, usually set in the future or based on science or technology. All right, and as we're reading, I'm going to go ahead and do a few drawing conclusion diagrams so that I can help you work through that. Of course, we're going to look at some evidence and then the conclusion that can be drawn from the evidence. So I'll be filling that out as we read. With that being said, let's go ahead and begin. The story is Zathura, a space adventure. It's written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. "Mom!" Danny Budwig yelled. "Mom!" Walter and Danny's mother stopped at her son's bedroom door. "Walter," she said, "get off your brother. Honestly, if you don't stop pulling on his nose like that, it'll end up looking like an elephant trunk." "Oh, yeah," said Walter. "Then he'll need ears to match." He let go of Danny's nose and grabbed his ears. "Enough," Mrs. Budwig shouted. Danny started it. "Look what he did," Walter yelled, picking up his walkie-talkie. The antenna was dangling by a wire. "See, he breaks everything." "I'm sure he didn't mean to," Mrs. Budwig said. Was an accident?" Danny mumbled. From downstairs, Mr. Budwig called to his wife. "We're going to be late." Mrs. Budwig gave her sons a goodbye kiss. "I set some dinner out on the kitchen. Dad and I shouldn't be too late." "Can't you take him with you?" Walter whined. I'm going to stop right there. Now, what are Mr. and Mrs. Budwig planning to do? What do you think they're planning to do? Let's go ahead and draw some conclusions, okay? Mr. Budwig says they're going to be late. We know that both parents put some food on the table for dinner. What do you think is going to happen here? Well, Mr. Budwig says that they're going to be late, which means that they're going somewhere. And Mrs. Budwig tells Danny and Walter that she's setting dinner out and kisses them goodbye, which means they won't be eating with the boys. So this is evidence that Mr. and Mrs. Budwig are going out for the evening. Okay, so the evidence here is that Mr. Budwig says they will be late, and then Mrs. Budwig says she will set out dinner. The conclusion we drew, of course, here is that Mr. and Mrs. Budwig are going out for dinner. All right, let's continue to read. Now, after the parents left, Walter sat down in front of the television. "Can me and you go outside and play catch together?" Danny asked. "It's you and I," said Walter, "not me and you." And the answer is no. But Danny really wanted to play. He threw Walter his hat, but Walter just ignored him, and then he tossed him a baseball and beaned him on the head. Walter jumped up. "All right, you little fungus, now you're really going to get it." Danny bolted out of the room, down the hall, and out the front door, and Walter closed behind. They ran into the park across the street, but Danny could not run his brother. Walter tackled him. I'm telling, Danny squealed as Walters got a grip of his nose and pulled. Let it go, then let it go. Hey, what's that? He said. Right next to the boys was a long, thin box resting against a tree. Walter got off his brother and picked it up. Ah, it's just some dumb old game here, he said, poking Danny in the stomach with the box. It's for babies like you. He trotted off as Danny read the words on the box. Jumanji, a jungle adventure. Danny stuck the game under his arm and ran home after his brother. Back inside, Danny looked at the box. It was covered with pictures of jungle animals. He took out the dice, some tokens, and a very plain game board. Walter was right. It was a babyish game and probably boring too. Now Danny started to put it away, but discovered jammed tightly into the box another board. He banged the box on the floor, and out it popped. Why does Danny take the game home, do you think? Why do you think Danny takes the game home? Well, Danny probably takes the game home because he is curious and wants to learn more about it. He examines it closely upon returning home. Also, Danny probably knows that he will have to play by himself because Walter refuses to play with him. This board was more interesting. It showed flying saucers, rockets, and planets in outer space, with a path of colored squares leading from Earth to a purple planet called Zathura, and back to Earth. Danny put a token on Earth, then rolled the dice, and after he moved along the path, something surprising happened. A buzzing sound came from the board, and a click, a small green card popped out of the edge right in front of him. He picked it up and read, Meteor shower, take evasive action. Hey, Walter, Danny started to say, what does And when he was interrupted by a noisy rat-tat-tat-tat sound coming from the roof. Walter looked up from the television. Holy smokes, he said, must be a hailstorm. It's not hail, said Danny, holding up the card. It's meteors. The noise grew louder, like 1,000 golf balls bouncing off the roof, and this room got so dark. Walter turned on the light. Then, kaboom! A rock the size of a refrigerator fell through the ceiling and crushed the television. See, Danny said, I told you, meteors. Walter stared at the hole in the ceiling. Okay, he agreed, meteors. But how did it get dark so fast? Through the hole, he could see that there was what was left of his parents' bedroom, and beyond that, a black star-filled sky. It looks like night up there. It's not night, said Danny. It's outer space. How do you think Danny and Walter will get themselves out of this situation? Well, the idea if Danny chooses another card from the game, it may offer them a solution to the problem of the meteors. So probably continuing to play the game may help them get to where they need to be. What are you talking about? Jeez, outer space? Walter muttered as he went to the front door. We just lost track of time. It's night, that's all. He threw open the door and almost took a step out before he realized there was no outside anymore. At least, not the one he expected. See, said Danny, outer space. He led Walter back to the living room and showed him the Zathura game and the card. Walter sat with his head in his hands, gazing at the path of colored squares. What wound around the board and ended back at Earth. Looks like, said Danny, we are playing the game, or we're up here forever. Great, said Walter. Up here, and you forever? Ah. He took a deep breath, put a token on Earth, and then rolled the dice and moved along the path. The board started to buzz and click, and a card popped out. He studied it silently and then tossed the card aside to the board. Danny leaned forward and read, the polarity on your gravity belt is reversed. I wonder what that means. He looked up, but Walter was gone. Walter, he called. Up here, he said. I've lost my gravity. Now, what would you be thinking or feeling if you were in Walter's shoes right now? What would you be thinking or feeling at this point in time? Well, you might be scared at the prospect of floating up to the hole in the ceiling and disappearing into outer space. You might be thinking about what you could do to return to Earth and make things back to normal again as well. That's not all you're going to lose, Danny said nervously, because he could see that Walter was being pulled slowly towards the hole in the ceiling and a lonely trip into outer space. Walter realized it too and started clawing at the ceiling, but he couldn't help himself from moving closer and closer to the hole. Danny looked around. Lying next to the meteor was a cord from the shattered television, and he tossed it to Walter, who knotted it tightly to his belt. Danny grabbed the end of the cord and tied his brother to the sofa. Danny rolled the dice and moved his token along the path. Click! Out popped another card. Your gyroscope is malfunctioning. Suddenly the house tilted. Everything in the room slid to one side, and Danny got buried under a mountain of furniture. He slowly dug himself out, clutching the game, only to find that Walter was floating back towards the hole in the ceiling. Okay? What purpose do you think that gyroscope serves on a spaceship? What do you think the purpose of it was? When it's malfunctioning, something happens, everything tilts. So with that being said, what do you think the purpose was? Well, Danny's card says that the gyroscope is malfunctioning, which means it's not working in the way it should. So the gyroscope must be a piece of equipment, and as soon as Danny reads the card, the house suddenly tilts. So a gyroscope helps a spaceship head in the right direction and stay in course. Danny tied himself to the sofa again and handed up the dice. Walter rolled and got his gravity back, dropping to the floor with a thud. Danny moved the piece up and handed him the card. Your robot is defective, Walter read. From the hallway came the sound of a rattling metal and steady clank, clank, clank. The boys stared at the doorway as a shiny silver robot stepped into view. He was having trouble walking on the tilted floor. His head rotated back and forth and seemed to freeze on Walter. The robot's eyes lit up and he spoke in an odd mechanical voice. Emergency, emergency. Alien life form, must destroy. His claw-like metal hands snapped open and shut. Uh-oh, Danny whispered. I think he's talking about you. Fortunately, when the robot stepped forward, he missed the door, banged into the wall, and fell to the floor. He got up and did it again, and then again. Better hurry up and roll,